Welcome to another RB1 colon and fantasy football podcast, part of the Fake Teams podcast channel. I am your humble host and Jarrett Stan Pete Rogers, and I am joined by all of the guys. We have resident old man and esteemed botanist Clark Barnes, the working girl and keeper of keys and grounds at Buccaneer bandwagon Jordan Smith, and ginger clean-shaven man and political wildcard Nick Botiford. Guys, how are we doing today?
Doing great, Pete.
Good, man. How you doing?
Doing well. I want to give shout-outs to Jordan for more or less calling Tom Brady to Tampa with his fervent support in 2019. I feel like Jordan knew that the Buccaneers were going to ascend to greatness in 2020, and so wanted to stake his flag and claim on the Bucs early.
I'm off the Buccaneers bandwagon now. It's not as fun without Jameis. So
it's too corporate.
Unless Jameis is there throwing 30 picks, it's not very entertaining to me.
It's not for Jordan. You're not a fan of the Tom Brady check down or throw it away.
No, I mean, what, they're gonna win 12 games? That's no fun. I want like 8 maximum here. Okay, that's fair. I'm loving the fact that the Buccaneers get Tom Brady. And Chris Godwin is like, I'm pretty partial to number 12, Tom. So you're going to have to really woo me here. I'm excited to see how that goes down.
I'm a big fan of Dibs. Like, it's his jersey, right?
It's
so
true.
Come at me with the offers.
The
right?
Bucs were quick to say that Brady in his contract negotiations said that he did not request number 12.
Right.
That all he requested was the phone numbers of his teammates.
I know, and what a nauseating story!
Stand-up
why
citizen.
Is this a story? Oh.
That's funny. That's good. That's good stuff.
That's still hurts.
48 candy grams were ordered in the greater Tampa Bay area, breaking a new city record.
Every member of the Bucs
arrangements.
Yeah, exactly. They all got editable arrangements and a card from Brady saying, "Hi, here's my expectations for you." It would be weird. I mean, it's going to be weird to see Brady in a different jersey. It'd be also weird to see that jersey. Or would it make more sense? Would it be less weird to see him in a different jersey and a different number?
I think you change the number, and and someone has it, so
right.
It doesn't.
Does someone have 10? Could he just go back to Michigan? Go back to his Michigan 10?
I think 3's available, right?
That would kind of screw the whole TB12. 3's available. Brady comes in and just takes Jameson's number. Yeah, there you go. Well, we got a lot to cover in the news because a ton of shit went down since our last pod, and we're going to then also talk a little fantasy 2020 and play a game that Clark created, and then finally, Clark-centric episode. We're gonna. As Clark told me off air, we're going to start. No decisions will be made on this show, but we're going to start, lay out the groundwork to what it will take to find Clark a new team to root for in 2020. But let's start with some news. And since there's so much to cover, I'm going to just list out all the big moves that have gone down, and then we can figure out who's worth chatting about / maybe a lot of the players that made moves we will be talking about in our Oh Boy O'Brien segment. But right after we got off the pod last week, Stephon Diggs got traded to the Bills. And then obviously Brady announced he was coming back to the Patriots and signed with the Bucs. And I did an emergency podcast on that, which you can listen to. I bared my heart and soul. I was very emotional. The Panthers went on to sign Teddy Bridgewater, moving on from Cam Newton. At some point, he's probably going to get traded or released. Phillip Rivers signed with the Colts. Bears traded for Nick Foles. Todd Gurley got released and then signed with the Falcons. The Giants signed Colt McCoy to eventually overthrow Daniel Jones and create quarterback controversy in New York. Melvin Gordon signed with the Broncos. Eric Ebron with the Steelers. Emmanuel Sanders signed with the Saints. And then just today, Clark, Shaboy Dion Lewis signed with the Giants. Where shall we begin? Or does it make sense to just jump right into our Oh Boy O'Brien segment, since a lot of the big names that we just listed will probably be mentioned?
There are a couple of names that I'm going to talk about that were just mentioned.
Nick and Jordan, you guys are a similar wavelength?
Good to go.
Okay. Yeah. Then we'll just move on to Oh Boy or Oh Brian, which is a segment that Clark pitched to us. Basically, moves we love, free agent moves that we love from a fantasy standpoint, and ones that we fucking hate and wish someone would get fired for. Clark's words. Actually, his words were fucking hate.
I feel like duck has been said trillions of times more thanks to Apple's autocorrect than it has ever in the past.
So should we just replace fucking with ducking, or is that just make that a social
I'm going to leave
trend?
that to the people.
All right, the people will speak. All right, so we each have an oh boy and we each have an O'Brien, and I'm going to throw a little spice on the fire to start. When you introduce your player, don't tell us if it's an oh boy or your O'Brien, and we'll guess. And so just, I don't know. We'll add some fun and intrigue there. Who knows? It could be a bomb. Jordan, why don't you start us off? Give us your first player that either you're really happy about or really not so happy about for fantasy, given their new landing spot for 2020.
So this one might be a little bit too obvious, but I'm actually really excited for like Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins. There's a lot of conversation really about Cliff Kingsbury, that's his name, his offense, and how Kyler Murray was spreading it around a lot last year and not really picking a favorite target. Yeah, some guys they like to go to more than others. But at the same time, I just feel like perhaps that's just an offense that lacks a clear number one. Larry Fitzgerald has been a number one receiver for a really long time, but I don't think he's just at that level to dominate the targets and dominate all of Kyler Murray's attention would have years past. So I think DeAndre Hopkins will be able to help out Kyler Murray a ton, and in turn help Kyler Murray a ton by opening up the field a little bit more, because you're going to have to take those receivers very seriously.
So kind of overlooked my added twist to the segment, Jordan. We were supposed to hide whether or not it was an oh boy or an O'Brien, but whatever. We'll overlook that for now.
Well, how else are you supposed to explain it?
Well, you could just be like, DeAndre Hopkins, am I excited about this or am I not? And we could have been like, you're definitely not, Jordan. DeAndre Hopkins in Arizona is going to bomb terribly and you should not draft him in fantasy. And we would be wrong.
Yeah, so I don't want to step on anything, but there's been a lot of discussions about what Tom Brady's impact on the Buccaneers is going to be. And I think his real impact on that team is going to be fantastic. But I think the fantasy impact is going to leave us a little wanting when it comes to Godwin and Mike Evans. And I think that's kind of the situation we're in with DeAndre Hopkins. He was already at such heights with Deshaun Watson that it's going to be tough for him to go higher. But DeAndre Hopkins taking a fairly large step back in fantasy still gives you the wide receiver 10.
Yeah.
So it is exciting for Arizona Cardinals fans. We are looking at something for me personally that is clearly a matter of perspective. DeAndre Hopkins is a fantastic receiver. He's a good route runner and an absolute vacuum cleaners for hands. Kyler Murray seems like a relatively bright guy, so hopefully he'll learn when the play is shot, just throw it towards DeAndre, and good things will likely happen.
Vacuum cleaners for hands is the best sure hands analogy I've ever heard.
Yes.
Yeah, that was outstanding. So I was going to do a whole nerd out segment over DeAndre Hopkins. And my plan initially was to break down the target market shares of the Cardinals over the years. And I thought that would just be too long.
Too much fun. It would be too much fun for everyone, Nick.
Segment. Yeah. Maybe I'll do a solo pod where I dissect this. But basically, the long and short of it is that there are a lot of targets that are going to be up for grabs for Hopkins. There were a lot of lesser players that were sort of the team was sort of forced to throw to last season, and he's going to step in and largely just take those targets. He's going to take targets from Fitzgerald. I think that Christian Kirk will continue to ascend. He and Fitz were Fitz had more targets than him. It was at like 21% of the target market share, while Christian Kirk was at 18. That was 2 years ago, and they were almost tied last year. I think Kirk's going to continue to ascend. I think he'll be around 20%. I think that Hopkins, he probably won't break into the elite target market share of 27% or higher. JJ Zach Reeson's podcast today talked about the fact that since I think it was like 2011, there have been 19 wide receiver seasons where someone acquires over 30% of the targets. He had 3 of those 19. Hopkins, that is, he's been a target vacuum and has them for hands. He's a very talented player. I think it's going to be a good offense. He's going to have to get over the humps of, being on a new team, but I expect him to still rack up around 25% of the targets. And I think that he'll be an A-OK top 5, at worst top 7 receiver, but that doesn't mean that he might not start the year slow. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. And I was giving Jordan a hard time. This was a perfect one to start with because it's not only just DeAndre Hopkins. I think it's a pretty smooth transition for him. This is a huge boost for Kyler Murray, and like Kyler Murray is going to be one of my top quarterback targets for 2020 fantasy drafts because of his rushing floor, because I think he's going to become more comfortable in the NFL, and because now he has one of, if not the best wide receiver in football to throw to. So I think it's a huge benefit for Kyler Murray's fantasy value in 2020.
I definitely agree with that. And I wanted to add, learned this from the Established Run podcast, and I'm just clarifying it here now. So we went to Clemson. So what was the scheme that Hopkins was in when he was in college? Was it, I was under the impression that it might have been sort of a similar air raid system, that basically he might just kind of, I don't know, I shouldn't be speaking on this, but my understanding is that he has familiarity with
he's going to just step in and know exactly what's going on and be able to crush.
I think that's the case, but don't quote me on that. We'll do some deep dives on Hopkins. It's going to be something we talk about all off season long.
Yeah, it's always hard to tell, but he doesn't have a huge reputation, I don't think, outside of Houston as a student of the game, but I think he's a really bright player. He seems to really be invested, and you just don't ever hear anything much about that side of it because he just kind of keeps to himself, which apparently Bill O'Brien hates. One last thing I want to throw on here is sometimes when a big wide receiver goes somewhere else, we can worry about like, well, who's going to get the ball then? How is this going to affect target share? And those are really good questions for fantasy. I think in this style of offense, we're going to see something like a really good defensive end going to an already good defensive line. There's going to have to be so much attention paid to that superstar that it's really going to be the rising tide that lifts all boats, and that breakout star is still going to have plenty for that to go around. So super interesting. Those 3 and 4 wide sets just get immediately better. Larry Fitzgerald against your third corner is fantastic. Christian Kirk against your second corner is amazing. So really exciting. Good way to start us off, Jordan. That's a good one.
And in the same vein as what Clark was saying about the, tide rising all ships. Is that it?
I'm pretty close.
Pretty close. Close enough. My fantasy signing, Emmanuel Sanders to the Saints. I love this because of the fact that we saw Sanders can still play at a good fantasy level and a good football level, had 800 plus yards and 5 touchdowns between the Broncos and 49ers last year. And I also I have the feeling that he's going to feast on number 2 corners, and with defenses worried about Michael Thomas, it's a perfect role for him. I wouldn't be surprised if he flirts with top 25 wide receiver value in 2020 with the Saints. He was 32 last year, and I think he could easily make that jump into the top 25, given how much attention is going to be on Michael Thomas and how, if he can get a connection with Drew Brees, which he's shown to be able to build a connection with the quarterback pretty quickly, he's going to be playing in the dome. I just think it's a great scenario for him, and the Saints have been looking for that reliable number 2 receiver, and Sanders fits that mold perfectly in my mind.
So I think that this is a hysterical signing when considering what the opposing defense is going to have to account for. Sanders, he's lost a step. He's not what he once was, but still, even if you were a team who is prepared for the 21st century football league, where you have 2 good slot defenders, when both of these guys kick inside on either side of the lineup, either one poor nickelback is going to be so overworked that he's not going to know what to do, or it's just you're going to have a strong safety on one of these guys. This is a perfect pairing for the system, and for the way that Drew Brees' arm is aging. He has lost a little pop downfield, bringing in they sort of just are doing the dynamic wide receiver in Michael Thomas who can do everything. He can line up everywhere. And instead of giving him a tight end target to work with, they just brought in one of, this generation's best slot receivers. It's awesome.
Yeah, this is one of my boys. I think one of the things that we talk about sometimes is new wide receiver going to new quarterback situation. And I think some folks might be a little scared off of that because of what we saw last year with Odell Beckham. One of the call-outs there is, relatively volatile young wide receiver going to relatively volatile young quarterback. I think that we're in a different situation.
Volatile.
Yeah.
It's like a whole
trying to
history
take
of
it
that.
easy on the Browns this offseason, I guess. But, like you said, Drew Brees knows what he's doing. Emmanuel Sanders, seems to have success everywhere he goes. I don't think that that's coincidence. It's not like he's going to a bunch of world-beating quarterbacks and he still manages to look good. Again, too many targets for even, like you said, Nick, even teams built for this style of football. I mean, they still got Alvin Kamara down there.
Yeah.
It's going to be really tough for opposing defenses, and that's what we love in fantasy.
Yeah, I'm gonna O'Brien this one.
Ooh.
Just for the collective idea of Drew Brees being another year older and Emmanuel Sanders being another year older. I mean, we've seen it a million times. You're like Father Time just comes up and creeps on everybody. And Emmanuel Sanders is a pretty good option, but like for a slot flex player, I don't know. I think an age, and I think the number two in New Orleans, I'm never really that excited about because I always thought Traquan Smith was going to be something pretty good, but he never panned out either.
Jordan coming in hot. I like it.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just playing devil's advocate. Somebody's got to come in and just.
That's good. I rewatched World War Z last night, and so I like your perspective of all of us agree. So you have to be the dissenting opinion, the only good part about that crappy movie.
Yeah, I was going to say
we're watching all the classic outbreak pandemic movies at the Barnes household.
Topical.
That's good.
I saw that you tweeted out that you were going to rewatch it and that you maybe didn't give it the proper due the first time around, but it did not sway you the second time around.
I tried. I gave it a fair shot. Not good. And I like Brad Pitt. Like, even though he's real hot and has a good life, like, even if you can look past that, like, he's pretty good. And that movie's
Yeah, no, my one of my roommates senior year of college, he was very obsessed with World War Z, the book, and the movie, he said, did not do it at all justice.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up here. Let's take this fantastic book by the title and just
make it a zombie movie.
Else. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
No changes there. Nick, who's your boy for 2020?
So we're not doing the Guess Who game.
You can if you want. I proposed it and then immediately rejected it.
So my boy, I'm sorry, I'm giving you a bad time. My boy, I just recently switched it. I was all set to talk about a different angle of this trade, but I think that the Stephon Diggs trade has massive fallout. Josh Allen finished last year as the quarterback 6, and as far as what I can find right now of ADP on Fantasy Pros, I'm not sure if this is like accurate to the day, but he's listed as the QB 21 in ADP. This guy, all of his, so Josh Allen, he misses deep, right? He misses big. But his entire receiving core right now, as far as the starters go, he's got John Brown burning down the field on the outside. He has Cole Beasley working the interior. Diggs is a downfield slot receiving option, basically the same thing as Adam Thielen. He's got Dawson Knox developing. Devin Singletary showed that he is a capable pass-catching back. Josh Allen will be in contention to be the overall quarterback 1, and he's not going to be taken as such because he misses a lot of passes. But you have a team made up just of burners. Like, this was such an excellent signing for him. Diggs is someone who, if somebody's a little bit off, he can teleport to a different part of the field. Now, I do think that Diggs' stats overall will be hurt. I don't think that he's going to hit the ceilings that he would have been able to hit in Minnesota just because the passing tree was so small there just with him and Thielen. But as far as Josh Allen goes, he's going to rock the box score every week. I love what the Bills are doing. I think it's so cool when you see a team recognize that the single biggest advantage in this sport is a quarterback on a rookie deal and just fully committing to the guy, bringing in assets to win right now. It's awesome. So yeah, my old boy is Josh Allen.
Yeah, I like the Josh Allen perspective because I'm and you said this too, Nick. Like, I'm not a fan of Stephon Diggs in 2020 from a fantasy perspective because of the fact that he's going to a different offense. And I know we just talked about two wide receivers, Sanders and Hopkins, who we're both very excited about. We're all very excited about for 2020 is making that transition. And now I'm going to say that a wide receiver making a transition is a hard thing to do, especially when you're going, as Diggs is going from, a running mate wide receiver one to the wide receiver one. Adam Thielen drew a bunch of attention, and so Diggs could operate. Diggs is now going to be the focal point of defense's attention when they play the Bills, and just Josh Allen's propensity for not hitting the target. It'll be interesting to see how Diggs works with that. For Josh Allen, you're giving him a legit number one wide receiver who can get open on a dime, and something that we love to talk about that Josh Allen offers that a few quarterbacks do, and you want to jump on these quarterbacks, is a solid rushing floor that's instantly already going to boost you into top 15, top 10 quarterback territory. And if Allen can take a step, even if it's a small step in the right direction and become a slightly more accurate quarterback, he now has the weapons that he could really, his stats could take a big leap forward and he could really solidify himself as a top 10. And I know, Nick, you said number one. That's a bit hot for me, but I would concede maybe a top 5 fantasy quarterback this year as like his ceiling.
I mean, again, he finished last year as 6. So
I'm spot on. I'm really smart. Well done, me.
Yeah.
He takes one step forward and he finishes 5th.
Yeah.
I will say that, a lot of people were getting their jokes off about Josh Allen after the Stephon Diggs trade, that he was, overthrow Stephon Diggs and he was going to do all these wacky things. But I don't really see that big of a difference between Josh Allen throwing the ball and Kirk Cousins. Kirk was probably a little bit more polished, but just by watching the Vikings games, Kirk Cousins throws up a lot of YOLO balls. Like Stephon Diggs did a lot of magic himself to bring down those footballs. So I think he can do the same thing with Josh Allen if they develop some sort of chemistry down the field. I don't think there's as drastic of a gap between Kirk Cousins and Josh Allen as a lot of people are saying, really.
So Stephon Diggs, from a completely fantasy lens perspective, for Stephon Diggs was my O'Brien, because I see this being one of the incredibly talented wide receiver who's had success, goes to new team and falls flat on his face situations. Not because Stephon Diggs is not good, but because while I think Josh Allen is a fantastic fantasy quarterback, I do not think that he is a good quarterback. I think he's going to continue to hold the Bills back. He may be able to do enough to propel a fantastic defense to plenty of wins, but while Kirk Cousins does throw up some YOLO balls, they are thrown to where someone can catch them. Josh Allen often throws things into a different zip code. And so Stephon Diggs is fantastic. I think he is incredibly talented. And he was one of those guys that I'm like, almost anywhere that he goes, this will be great. And then he went to the Bills. Because remember how excited we were about John Brown last year, who's a lesser talent. Yes, but that didn't seem to work out, right? So, but Josh Allen's super young. I don't want to be pessimistic. Diggs is a fantastic weapon, but for fantasy, when I saw this happen, I'm out. And Nick, you mentioned Josh Allen's fantasy value. I do think that this helps it. And at quarterback 22, hell yeah, I am in, and I am going to do that. It's fun to cheat and go last. I looked up my fantasy league best ball 10 ADP, and there he's going 7. I think that he'll be in your redraft home leagues. I think he's going to be somewhere right around the middle of these two spots. I think that his real ADP when we get closer to draft season is going to be around 13, 14. There's going to be sharp folks who are like, last year he was 6 and he just got Stephon Diggs.
Yeah.
And then there'll be jabronis like me who are like, I don't like him. He's not very good at football. And so he'll fall in there and he's going to be a great later target that could really, probably not on the same level, but have that Lamar Jackson effect of like, holy crap, a lot of teams that won their championships took a shot on Josh Allen.
Yeah, point. So I do think that he'll probably end up being drafted far higher in best ball than he will in redraft, because in best ball you just go for the ceiling and
you're taking 2.
You draft. Yeah,
you get all the good games and none of the bad ones,
and you don't have to be the one to decide when he goes in the lineup. A lot of folks out there are very scared to make these like kind of questionable, or what they perceive to be questionable, like, oh no, I just don't want that headache kind of a thing. Give me Josh Allen and Baker Mayfield this year.
Oh yeah.
Oh man. Right?
That's a great one too.
Give me the headaches.
Yeah, dude.
Does anyone have any more boys before we take an ad break and move on to O'Brien's? No? Splendid. Well then let's quickly break for some advertisements before we go to some O'Brien's. All right, so we've done some boys. This is just merging into like my Mickey Mouse voice. Oh boy.
It's fun watching it happen live.
Thank you. I know I have to contort myself to get the voices. I can't not just do it. It's like when you watch voice actors and they're like acting out or their face changes in order to like get the voice. That's how I operate here on the RB1 podcast. O'Brien's, some players who we're not loving in 2020 fantasy football because of the fact that what's gone down this offseason. Obviously, we've touched on Stephon Diggs. We've touched on Emmanuel Sanders as both guys who are not maybe super sold on. Well, Jordan's not sold on Emmanuel Sanders. We're all on Emmanuel Sanders. I'll start us off with an O'Brien. It's not a player who changed teams. It's a player who's going to get affected by the change of teams. I love him, but I'm unfortunately going to have to pass on him. I'm not sold on DJ Moore being as good in fantasy as he was last year with Teddy Bridgewater under center. Now, I could be proven wrong, but the biggest thing that has me worried is DJ Moore averaged 13.5 yards per reception last year and was clearly the number one guy. The targets and receptions I'm not too worried about, but Teddy Bridgewater on his career, 7.2 yards per attempt. Last year when he took over for the Saints in the 5 games he played, 7.1 yards per attempt. And he had 10 yards per completion. My worry is that Teddy Bridgewater is known to be safe with the ball, looks for kind of the shorter pass, check downs, looks to get that work in that area of the field as opposed to necessarily taking the deep shot. Maybe in a different offense, he'll play differently with a little more confidence. But now that he's a starter, I have no idea. But it seems like the Panthers are bringing him in as a, kind of keep the offense moving. We're not going to put too much pressure on him. And that to me means DJ Moore might not get as many looks down the field as he got last year. I think it's going to be great for Christian McCaffrey because Christian McCaffrey is going to eat. But I'm a little worried about DJ Moore playing as well. I mean, he was wide receiver 21 last year. All right. Well, I would say I'm worried that he plays back into the top 25 this year.
I will say Teddy Bridgewater is head and shoulders better than Kyle Allen. So that can help DJ Moore's stock a little bit. And we can take a quick trip down narrative street. I think there's an argument to be made that Teddy Bridgewater was very well aware going to go and try to get a contract last year. So maybe he was just kind of hesitant to make too many mistakes or put too many bad plays, I should say, on film to impact that number and just kind of played it safe. And I think that's what the Panthers rewarded him with, a contract. And now that he's a little bit more secure in his situation, who knows, maybe he'll let it fly a little bit. I guess you have to go back a little bit, check him out in Minnesota or Louisville back in those days to see how
he was doing.
He really opted. Yeah.
So I'm trying to find this in real time here. I can't remember if it was, again, the guys I mentioned earlier, Zach Reason or the ETR guys, but DJ Moore makes his bread and butter after the catch. So you were saying he's averaging like 13 yards per catch, but I'm willing to bet he's getting 6 of those after. He's routinely been one of the best in the league, and I think I found
where's his yak?
I'm having trouble finding it, but so I have quite the
yak
opposite.
Per reception in 2019, 4.4 yards. He had 7.7 in 2018. So I agree with you that but he was not, at least according to Pro Football Reference.
Okay, so I've got him as number 17 in the league for yards after the catch. That's overall. So that's, Christian McCaffrey had 1,000 yards after the catch. So that we're incorporating all positions here. Now, I think that Teddy Bridgewater is actually uniquely one of the better quarterbacks that DJ Moore could have been paired with, because he does have such a low depth of target. DJ Moore is so, I think what he will be is sort of a rich man's Golden Tate. He is a running back with the ball in his hands, and he is an excellent route runner, excellent receiver. I am much more in the oh boy camp. I think that this is an awesome pairing for him.
Yeah, for me, this one is incredibly tough. I've always liked Teddy Bridgewater. I thought he played well early in his career, and he has been with several games of an exception, kind of disappeared, right? New Orleans is a fantastic offense, and he was able to play pretty well in that, filling in for Drew Brees last year. There's a lot of things changing in Carolina. If the only thing changing is that Cam Newton is actually gone, that's still pretty huge. That DJ Moore was able to play okay last year with the, outside of the we've never seen this guy before 3 or 4 game bump that we saw from, what's his name, who you just said 4 times?
Kyle Allen.
Kyle Allen, thank you. I don't know. There are so many unknowns with this, but I do think that DJ Moore is good, and I do think that Teddy Bridgewater is solid. And so this will be a complete, if DJ Moore is going in the top 18 of wide receivers, I'll be railing against what a bad decision that is. If he's like around the 30, 32 area, I'll be talking about how stupid everyone is for not taking the shot on DJ Moore. So
let's get a board better so I'm going here, because he finished halfway PPR last year as the wide receiver 13 overall. So he was the premier wide receiver 2. I'm willing to bet he stays as the wide receiver 13 or better. I think he finishes as a wide receiver 1 this year. What do you guys say?
So this is incredibly nebulous, but I'm going to make this statement either. Finished as the wide receiver, whatever, last year is not a ow, motherfucking cat. Is not a totally worthless stat. But with injuries, and,
Clark was about to say some hot take, and the cat was like, having none of this, Clark.
Yeah. There are so many things that can go into someone ending up as the wide receiver, 10, wide receiver 15, and people being uncomfortable starting that person all year. So it's not that stat is misleading, because it is a fact. I mean, you can look at the numbers and that's where it is, but I don't know, top 10 wide receiver for DJ Moore this year?
12. Standard 12 team leagues. I think he finishes in the top 12.
That's just I'll just always take the under, right? We're a Teddy Bridgewater injury, we're him missing 4 games away from that not hitting. I think you being comfortable starting DJ Moore for 10 games this year, I think that's a very solid prospect, because he's talented and so is Teddy Bridgewater.
I will say
really
that
threw me off my game.
That's a valid point, Clark, because it's basically betting DJ Moore against injury and quarterback play and just the new coaching scheme in general not really clicking there in its first year. But I'm not saying they're the same player or are going to be the same player, but the third year or so tends to be a pretty good breakout year for wide receivers. So last year was just DJ Moore's age 22 season. And last year was Chris Godwin's age 23 season. And that's when he really burst onto the scene. We were waiting on it for a year or two. So that could be something to look at. Devontae Adams is another player that burst onto the scene after his third year too. So That's just, again, wild narrative street talk. So who knows?
I just would like to humbly accept this collective L that has been handed to me from the RB1 podcast. I will honor it. It will go on my trophy case, and I will polish it and look at it fondly when DJ Moore proves me wrong and finishes our wide receiver 1 this year.
So we can talk a bunch about like the 30-year narrative. I think that kind of got turned on its head after like the 2015 Mike Evans draft, basically. But players who break out early in college and in the NFL at a very young age, that's just them doing very well while their body is still physically developing. And there is high correlation of success where if players are good when they are very young, when they are younger than average for the year that they are in the league, that probably means that they're very good. They tend to be very good. So I'm all in on DJ Moore. I love it. What else we got?
I think
I'm not going to let us move on. This is going to be incredibly fun all off season because he's really good. So he's going to be tempting, and this will be a really fun one to watch. Okay, I'm sorry.
All right, yeah, we can move on. I think everyone else has shared. Nick, what's your O'Brien? O'Brien.
My O'Brien is just me taking a victory lap on the fantasy community. So last year I was very low on Devontae Freeman because of his stretchy knee. And I was also very low on Todd Gurley because of his exploded knee. And now we get to fold them into one as Todd Gurley takes over Devontae Freeman's job in the Falcons backfield. I said this to the group when it happened. I think replacing a running back with a degenerative knee, I know that technically, well, actually it is degenerating once it hyperextends and it does anyway. So replacing a running back with a degenerative knee because he couldn't handle a full workload with a running back with a degenerative knee because he can't handle full workload. We're doing the same thing twice. I don't know what they're thinking.
But he's younger.
And his knee is worse. So what we saw last year with Todd Gurley, he flashed via like workload and being deployed at the goal line from time to time, but he is not what he was even like a year ago. I don't know what the Falcons front office is thinking. Now I believe it's a 1-year deal.
It's like a 1-year $5 million deal, I think.
So they're not even. I don't think they're going to even ask him to prove it. They're just doing this to try to get a Super Bowl, and they're going to hope they finally hit on somebody in the draft. But I think we're going to be looking at another offseason, depending on who they take, unless it's a high pick or like a guy with a lot of hype. Because I just don't think that like Quadri Allison is going to suddenly separate. We're going to be looking at the same old like Falcons backfield where since Tevin Coleman departed, where we're just like, oh well, I'm sure this guy who's he's third string now, but maybe he'll be good at some point. I think it's going to be a real bummer to try to work on the Falcons backfield. I won't be drafting Todd Gurley in any league because he's going to be getting taken really highly. I'll say if Gurley drops to like the 6th, I'd take him. But I don't think he's getting out of the top 2 or maybe 3.
I think he's going to,
So big
I'm
O'Brien
curious. I think 3 or 4,
Gurley.
but I still think that's too high.
Yeah, I think 3rd round is probably where I would think he would go, and I agree that's still high. I think if he fell into the 5th, I would take a flyer on him because if he does,
depending on how my draft had gone.
Sure. But yeah, you're right. I think he's not. I don't think I would have the confidence in him to take him where he's likely going.
Yeah. Did we all avoid every running back move that's been made this offseason as something to be excited about? Because I was like, I'm going to change it up and go wide receiver because the fellows will probably want to talk about the running back.
Yeah, I think we didn't talk about a single running back.
Yeah.
I kind of like the Melvin Gordon signing. I'm going to be honest.
What? Why? I'm really curious.
Because I think he and Philip Lindsay pair well together as a 1-2 punch, and we've seen backfields be able to offer viable fantasy starters with both running backs. Philip Lindsay hasn't been. Since he's a smaller guy, I think they're going to look to balance the touches. And I mean, Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler were both able to eat when Gordon came back. And I think that this Broncos offense is not going to want to put the ball entirely in Drew Lock's hands. So I don't know.
So it's such a weird signing, and I think it challenges a lot of our preconceived notions, just generally preconceived notions about what a passing back is and what a like banger back is, because Philip Lindsay is their ball carrier. They don't throw him the ball. Last year they tried to make Royce Freeman their passing back. And I think Royce Freeman is actually a good two-way back. I think that some team could absolutely employ him effectively as a dual threat. But they want to have Philip Lindsay bang for like 12 to 15 carries a game and maybe throw him a target. And they're bringing in Melvin Gordon to be the passing down back. It is so it'll either be they'll keep the traditional mold where you think that you're supposed to run on first and second and pass on third, whether it's the opposite. They should have Melvin Gordon out there on first and second and be chucking it to him. If they do that, then I'll become a Broncos. I was born in Denver, so technically I'm a Broncos fan, but it could be interesting. I could also see this just being a real bad experiment gone wrong where we're all really frustrated. Sure. I don't know. Yeah, but again, you have a take on this.
Okay. Do we think that Jameis Winston is going to be able to pilot this offense and use both of these quarterbacks? Or both of these running backs?
He'll do it.
I just want to reach back on the Todd Gurley point. From a football standpoint, it doesn't really matter all that much because it's a cheap deal for 1 year. And, if they basically get to see what Todd Gurley, they get to get his medicals and see how they can handle everything. From a fantasy standpoint, I'm pretty much out on it, unless for whatever reason they draft like a first round guard that's like Quentin Nelson caliber who can change like the entire offensive line to just make them world beaters, because that's still a mess down there. They're not changing that or helping that by signing a injury prone running back.
Yeah. Any other O'Briens that we need to talk about before we find Clark a new NFL team?
No, so this doesn't really count because he didn't go anywhere, but I'm a little bit worried about Mike Evans' stock still, just because I don't think Tom Brady is going to be as effective as throwing the ball down the field, and Chris Godwin just kind of seems primed to be like
Brady's
almost a perfect
target.
weapon. Yeah, he seems like he's like the perfect weapon for Tom Brady and what like he is still able to do for the most part.
It'll be what I'm most curious about is Mike Evans versus OJ Howard, because I feel like those two guys could each play the Gronk role. Like OJ Howard obviously as a tight end will play the like middle of the field guy, but down by the red zone, Brady likes to target big physical receivers. And that's why Gronk was easily putting in double-digit touchdowns with, and I'm just curious to see if that attention stays on OJ Howard or in Bruce Arians' system, which isn't that tight end heavy. Do we see all of that red zone attention? Does Brady just like fixate on Mike Evans? Because Brady hasn't had, outside of Gronk, Brady really hasn't had a big physical receiver like that. Randy Moss was a speed guy, and you would just throw it downfield, and he could win jump contested balls. But Mike Evans is like the physical box you out. And I'm curious to see where the attention goes to, whether it's OJ Howard or Mike Evans. I feel like those are the two guys who are going to be kind of playing off of each other. I think you're right, Jordan. Chris Godwin is like made in a lab for Tom Brady. So Godwin, I feel like, is going to continue what we saw from last year.
I hate to ask this before I make the point, but is Byron Leftwich still the offensive coordinator?
Yes, he is.
Yeah. So I think Bruce Arians is kind of noted for saying, hey, there's no black coaches in the NFL, and I'm a white fella, and I'm going to hire some black coaches and put them, give them an opportunity. So while I think Byron Leftwich is from the Arians school, and we might see a lot of those elements, I think we're going to be see something interesting this year from is Leftwich going to develop, because Arians kind of, one of the things that he's most known for, at least in my little mind, is getting his quarterbacks killed.
Yeah.
And Tom Brady is simply not going to participate in that. So either the Bucs will change their offense, or it's going to be a very short-lived career for Tom down in Tampa Bay. So we may not see that chuck it deep offense that we've expected from, early career Ben Roethlisberger, Andrew Luck, and, Carson Palmer. We may see Byron Leftwich really established himself with his own unique style with a quarterback who doesn't have the arm, doesn't have the mobility that he maybe once had, which is funny to say about Tom Brady's mobility, but is an incredibly smart player who's really good at making reads and using all of the weapons that the Bucs have. So I don't know, but you need to see what Leftwich does with the offense this year.
I think I missed the initial part about Leftwich, but Arians has always been super high on him as a coach, and I'm stoked to see that guy continue to develop. As far as the passing goes, Brady's arm, or what people are saying is lack thereof, the Fantasy Football Podcast and The Ringer, those guys unearthed some fantastic facts that had me. I was very much like, oh man, it's a terrible match, and then they started saying that Brady, his completion percentage on deep balls is like top
Brady's
3.
Still got it, baby. You can't tell me otherwise.
Yeah, and the stats support you. He's still a very effective downfield thrower, which, there are so many narratives about what Brady is and what the Patriots have been. Then the thing that I'm just always coming back to now is like coaching matters. Coaching is the most important friggin' thing outside of a QB who won't tank your team. And what happens on the field is a product of them more so than the players. But regarding the OJ Howard thing, JJ Zach Reese and he's been debunking is, look, Brady threw to the tight end when he had a good tight end. He didn't throw to the tight end when he didn't have a good tight end. We've got the dual factors of Arians not really wanting to use tight ends, but also OJ Howard went from a very good prospect to looking just terrible no matter what last year. So I don't know if this is really that much of an open question, but as far as the downfield stuff goes, I think I'm probably going to be targeting Evans because I think he's going to drop a bit. I was just took a page out of Clark's book and tried to go find the best ball ADP, and it looks to me like Evans is the wide receiver 6, Godwin being drafted as the wide receiver 7. Obviously, I'm super stoked on Godwin, but if Evans starts to tumble, I'm going to be all in on him as my wide receiver 1. We had 2 brilliant football minds here. I think, it would have been cool if Arians had come up now because I think he'd be more open to stuff. Like he sort of just falls backwards into a lot of he falls backwards into a lot of updated scientifically supported play calling methods that he doesn't really agree that they're supported scientifically, but it's the way he does things. Anyway, that's an aside. Point is, I'm high on Mike Evans this year. Chris Godwin's going to be the man. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens at running back because Ronald Jones has just been a big old ball of nothing. And I've quoted, the Nelson Sousa story about him time and again about how he didn't do anything in his rookie offseason. I could see him making a move there for a good pass protector, or 2019 July Nick will be what's the word I'm looking for? Save. And we see the rise of Dare Ogunbowale, but I'll keep my fingers crossed for that one.
I hope my boy Scotty Miller can take over the Philip Dorsett role and just vulture some touchdowns and piss people off a little bit.
Maybe Duke Johnson's available if the Texans agree to pay him and also send a 6th round pick to Tampa Bay.
Who says
that'd be
no?
fun?
That'd be perfect. That's exactly what
Bill
you want
O'Brien
to see.
Helping his old buddy Tom out.
Yeah, like a younger, hipper Deion Lewis
Perfect.
Reunites with Tom Brady.
Seems like a match made in heaven. Speaking of matches made in heaven, let's find Clark Barnes, a 2020 NFL team to root for. Now, when we did this with Nick, I laid out 4 important guidelines for picking a team. And now we don't need to pick a team right now, but I just want to get the guidelines out and we can start percolating as to whom this team could be. 4 rules for picking a team. Number 1, the team cannot be a, quote, hot team because then it looks like you're a bandwagoner. So you can't pick any team that is on the rise or people are suddenly being like, ooh, this is a saucy team. The Buccaneers are an example here. Number 2, you need at least one lovable player on the team because you need someone to root for. Number 3, you need to like the fan base you're joining since you're going to become associated with those people. And finally, number 4, they need jerseys that you like because you are going to be wearing them. Now, in my mind, Clark, there seems to be a number one candidate for where you should take your allegiances, but I'm curious to hear where you're leaning towards with these rules stated.
So the rules are solid. I'm not going to get married to them.
That's
I
fair.
am more of an eliminator, and I kind of have some top ones. So like, you cannot join a hot team. So like the Chiefs are out.
Done.
I'm not going to root for a garbage team because as a Houstonian, I've been rooting for garbage teams almost my entire life, and so I'm going to try to enjoy it at least a little bit. As far as the fan bases go, that's a commitment. I don't know if I can consider that because I'm such a pessimist with humanity anyway. That would kind of eliminate most fan bases.
Fair.
So there's some front runners, but yeah, I'm taking applications right now.
It could be just a fan base that's like completely self-loathing and just like hates themselves and knows that we're not going to win anything this year, so we're going to root for those 5 wins though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm from Houston, so not the Cowboys. But good point.
I would propose the Arizona Cardinals seem like a perfect choice. Is that you would travel with DeAndre Hopkins and join him on this ascending team, not a hot team, but an ascending team with a fun young quarterback, and you have an already established veteran, Larry Fitzgerald, to root for, who's like one of the best humans on earth. DeAndre Hopkins is now there. Their jerseys are fine. Fan base seems fine. They feel like, to me, is a front runner in my mind for you, Clark.
You can still wear your Hopkins jersey in a Cardinals bar if those exist outside of Arizona.
Yeah, that's true. You could repurpose it. Especially, is it a red Texans jersey?
No, it's blue.
Okay,
unfortunately.
But still, could definitely still wear it.
I'm just going to blow this whole thing up and point out that this distinction between ascending team and hot team is complete hogwash.
Oh, they're very different, Nicholas.
If anybody was paying attention last year, Mr. Pete Rogers constructed this whole thing because he thought it would be funny to get me to root for my Seattle Seahawks rival. The San Francisco 49ers. That is how we
Don't put this on me. This is a well-constructed list. This had no purpose behind it.
If you were listening to our previous podcast, when I asked Pete about what he wanted from Tom Brady, he just said either the Pats or retire because it would cause him too much pain to watch him play for another team. You will notice that when he listed his first rule, he only named one team that we can't pick. That's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And since my entire reason for being on this podcast tonight is to make Clark be the biggest Bucs fan in the world, so that every damn podcast Pete has to introduce him as the biggest Bucs fan and Tom Brady fan in the world, the only answer is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and that is it.
Well, there goes Nick.
Yeah, so I don't know if Nick has really invested in looking into my psychological profile, but him selecting spite as the reason that I pick a team is really tempting for me.
It's right on the nose.
I will say, in Pete's defense, I don't really know of any other teams that are like quote unquote hot right now. I think everybody's talking about Tampa Bay, but we don't really know anybody who's like that it factor. All those people that are betting on like the random Chargers seasons or the Browns last year or something like that.
I feel like the Chiefs and the Ravens are off the table.
So just it's early, but one team that I'm thinking about going back to is I've always liked the Packers.
Oh, see, that's what Becca's suggestion was. And I said that
Becca's a smart lady.
That would put us at a 50-50. I mean, 50% Packers podcast. It's a lot.
You know what, Clark, we'd welcome you with open arms. We could drink beer and eat cheese, and we can debate about whether or not Aaron Rodgers is still good. We can talk about the ascending defense. Talk about Devontae Adams, who can be your new DeAndre Hopkins. Whoever they get in the draft is probably going to be okay.
Yeah, but what's tough about the Packers?
Pick.
What's tough about the Packers is Packers fans, at least the ones that I know, are really knowledgeable. And I just kind of like to fly by the seat of my pants. So I don't know. We'll see though. They're a front runner early.
I like how, Clark, as a host for a football podcast, you like to fly by the seat of your pants.
So I
Well,
feel
this
like
is where he
it
gets his
started
juice.
as a bit, but now I'm just going
this is
with
true.
it.
Nice. I like it.
I was going to suggest, and I don't know if this checks off a lot of boxes, but Spite checks off a Houston box, perhaps. A team that might be moderately hot, kind of fun to root for. Tennessee Titans.
Titans are off the list. I hope that everyone associated with owning that franchise stubs their toe every morning for moving them from Houston.
Okay, I was trying to get the Houston tie-in back there to see if you'd maybe still consider rooting for them, but
Understandable.
Understood.
And I won't hold it against you. But no.
That's such a beautiful, like, instead of I wish that this person would die, just like I wish that they would stub their toe repeatedly every morning. That's a beautiful way. Beautiful.
Just
way
the
to say it.
ownership, not the players, not the
No,
fans. They
yeah.
don't have anything to do with it. Just the people who made the decision or profited massively from it.
All right. Well, we'll continue to track this religiously throughout the offseason. What team will gain Clark's allegiances for the 2020 season, if there's a 2020 season. So we'll make sure we'll be tracking that. Obviously, we know it won't be the Titans, it won't be the Texans, it won't be the Chiefs. Were there any other teams that we entirely eliminated?
I think the Ravens are too good. Like, I like the Ravens, and I'm going to continue liking them. But making them my team,
join them.
I'm already like the co-chair of the treasury of the Lamar Jackson fan club, so that's good enough.
That's true. All right, Nick, you logged on just again for goodbyes. So goodbye, Nick.
I felt bad.
It was quite the exit, though. It was quite the exit.
What did we land on?
We are still up for debate. We're still the same. We're going to track it all off.
You'll have to listen to find out. For all of you who tuned in late,
and
it's a radio show.
And with that, make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, the whole 9 yards. We are there. Follow us on Twitter at RB1 Podcast. You can follow myself at PM Rogers. Follow Clark at NFL Clark, Jordan at Jordan_Smith27, and Nick at Ginger__Nick without a K. We will be back at you next week. Until then, peace.